I knew they were going to cut me the moment the new CTO walked into the war room and called it a legacy asset. Not core IP, not primary engine, not our anchor pitch module. Legacy asset. Like I was someone's dusty aunt knitting in the server room. Never mind that I'd built it. Never mind that every line of that code had my fingerprint. Every sequence was clocked to precision triggers only I understood. No, to him it was something to be rebranded, restructured, maybe even rewritten by a team he could control. He strutted in, all $900 shoes and MBA metaphors, flanked by a couple yes-men who looked like they'd confuse an API call with a brunch reservation. "We need full access," he said, not even looking at me. "No more proprietary silos. This is a team effort now." I didn't blink. I just stared at the whiteboard behind him, the one that still had my timestamp from the last working build. They hadn't erased it. Probably didn't know what it meant. Quick pause. Hey, if you've made it this far, take a second to subscribe and hit like. Seriously, 97% of people listen without subscribing, but it makes a huge difference for the team bringing these stories to life. Back to that room. I calmly folded my hands. "You already have access to the wrappers and the shell interface," I said. "Everything you need for the pitch is live tested. No risk." The CTO smiled, that thin corporate smile that always means a storm's coming. "I want root access," he said. "The pitch is in 5 days. We can't afford you being precious with your code." Precious? My jaw tightened, but I didn't rise to it. That code wasn't just syntax. It was strategic isolation, modular dependencies, time-lock triggers, and redundant compression fallbacks built across 8 years and 3 infrastructure migrations. And I knew one thing better than anyone else. If you didn't understand the architecture from the start, you'd never rebuild it in time. I'd kept the core undocumented by design. Not because I was hiding it, but because every hand that touched it after mine wanted to optimize it, trim it, clean it up. And every time they tried, it buckled. The system didn't want clean. It wanted precision. The kind only experience could give it. The kind they just fired. What they didn't realize is that my legacy wasn't the problem. It was the glue. After the meeting, I went back to my office, if you could call it that. Just a corner desk with a dozen black notebooks lined in order, old school style. No cloud, no central repo, no digital backups. Call it paranoia, call it survival instinct, but I didn't trust the company to protect what I'd built, so I didn't give them the tools to destroy it. I started packing that day. Not much, just those notebooks, a couple flash drives, and the keys to my private dev rig. No one noticed. They were too busy rewriting their pitch deck to inflate numbers they didn't understand. They wanted to raise $180 million on the back of a system they barely knew how to boot. Day before I left, the CTO cornered me again, this time with his little HR puppet beside him. "You either hand it over," he said, "or you're out." I looked him in the eye, dead calm. "You already made that decision. I just write the code." Then I walked. No drama. No speech. Just logged out, wiped the interface shell, and left my badge on the desk. What they didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that the engine wasn't just a product. It was me. They didn't fire a developer. They fired the only person who could make it breathe. The ambush came during the Tuesday sync, right before lunch. Perfect timing if your goal is maximum humiliation and minimal witness empathy. Everyone was hungry, half distracted, notes open, coffee stale. That's when the CTO stood up, cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a TED Talk, and said, "Before we begin, there's a personnel matter to resolve." I knew. You feel it in your bones when someone decides you're expendable. Not for cause. Not for failure. Just inconvenient. A symbol of a chapter they want to erase. And because I didn't kneel every time he flexed his jargon or demanded a new code walkthrough he couldn't follow, I became the threat. "We've decided to part ways with our senior systems engineer," he said, like he was announcing a weather delay. "It's become clear that siloed practices are stalling collaboration, and moving forward, transparency is non-negotiable." Somewhere across the room, a VP nodded, eyes down. Coward. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. Just reached into my tote, pulled out my badge, and set it on the table, clean, deliberate, final. You could hear the magnetic clip touch the wood. A sound so small, but somehow louder than any of the CTO's pre-scripted power trip. I looked around the room one last time. Most people looked away. Except Derek. 25, still learning to spell containerization, eyes wide with panic. He muttered, barely audible. Wait, she was the only one who ever got it to work. CTO didn't even look at him. Just exhaled sharply and said, "We'll manage. It's just code." That line stuck with me as I walked out. Just code. Tell that to the checksum protocols no one's ever fully mapped. Tell that to the machine learning thresholds I tuned by hand after every dev release. Tell that to the sync architecture designed to trip if accessed in the wrong order. Tell that to the 6 failed rebuilds they tried before giving up and using mine. I didn't even go back to my desk. Everything important was already gone. Notebooks. Backups. The one encrypted thumb drive they didn't know existed. Locked with a key derived from a 37-character string no one would ever guess because it was my father's ham radio call sign. The rest? Let him keep it. Obsolete shells and mirrored facades. By the time I reached the parking garage, my Slack access was revoked, my calendar wiped, and my inbox forwarded to transition support. They moved fast, I'll give him that. But not fast enough to fill what they just amputated. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, watching the notification cascade on my phone. Goodbye pings. Some genuine. Most performative. One from the CTO himself CCing half the org. Wishing her all the best in future endeavors. We're excited about what comes next. What came next? A version of the system no one could run. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My hands were clean. My mind was free. And my terms from now on were going to be mine alone. First attempt to launch the demo was Wednesday morning, right on cue. CTO strutted into the West conference room with his pep talk loaded and his espresso half-drunk, ready to impress a dozen mid-level VCs with buzzwords and bullet points. The build was supposed to autoplay, complete with animations and performance metrics overlaid on a glossy UI. Instead, the screen just hung. Blue spinner. Then black. Then an error prompt so barebones it looked like something spit out of a 2003 BIOS check. Module core unresolved. They tried again. Same result. Someone ran a hot patch override from the local sandbox. The spinner spun. And spun. Then it crashed straight to console. No logs. No stack trace. Just exit. A back-end dev named Vish cursed under his breath. Then yanked open the core loader files. What he found didn't make sense. Modular branches nested inside modular branches. Layered with abstracted functions, self-healing dependency chains, and 0 inline comments. No README. No instructions. The main kernel looked like it was mapped in procedural code that evolved each time it ran. After 40 minutes of guessing, someone finally asked the obvious. How does it work? The CTO cleared his throat. It's a distributed logic system with recursive verification layers. Very bleeding edge. I've seen this before. Probably a versioning issue. Vish looked at him like he just asked if Java and JavaScript were the same thing. Sir, the verification module isn't pointing to any static paths. It's sequenced. Time sequenced. With checksum loops I've never even seen before. I think it's learning from itself. CTO doubled down. Well, that's good, right? It's adaptive. No, Vish said flatly. It means the engine was trained on a human rhythm. Someone taught it to expect certain inputs, in a certain order at a certain pace. This thing doesn't just run. It performs. Silence. Another engineer, I think her name was Kayla, chimed in from across the table. There's no version history in the repo. No fallbacks. No mirrored backups. Nothing. Did we ever get documentation from her? Eyes turned toward the CTO. He hesitated. It was implied that full control had been transferred. No, Kayla said, not unkindly. She never did. You assumed she would. Big difference. That's when the cracks started forming. The CTO stopped pacing. The cadence of his voice, that confident, polished cadence, slowed. He leaned against the whiteboard, crossed his arms and said, Look, we've got talented people here. We can recreate it. But his eyes were scanning. Not the room, the timeline. The clock. The pitch was less than 48 hours out. And every hour wasted on reverse engineering was another $1 million of confidence slipping through their fingers. By late afternoon, they tried 3 reboots, 1 container shift, a rollback to last month's config, and even a brute force override. Nothing worked. Because what they didn't understand was, the engine wasn't made to be copied. It was made to be run by one person. And she had left the building. By Thursday morning, the panic was no longer whispered. It buzzed. Through Slack threads. In broken lines of terminal logs. Between elevator rides and half-eaten breakfast burritos. You could hear it in the way meetings kept getting rescheduled. Then canceled. Then suddenly made mandatory. The CTO brought in 3 senior engineers from the Boston office. Heavy hitters with decades of DevOps between them. One used to teach at MIT. Another had worked on crypto wallets. They walked in smug, like they were being summoned to fix a teenager's science fair project. 2 hours later, their confidence was bleeding out of the war room carpet. "This isn't modular," one of them said, pointing to the screen. "It's a labyrinth. Every node connects to a time signature. And if the execution order isn't perfect," he paused as the system locked up again, "you get nothing." They tried dissecting it piece by piece. Forking segments, isolating modules, using a synthetic interface to dummy the triggers. Still nothing. The compression engine, the entire point of the pitch, simply refused to initialize. The deeper they got, the weirder it got. Built-in drift tolerances, ghost checks, dead-end functions that didn't do anything except act as keys for deeper subsystems. Someone called it paranoid engineering. Another just called it art. And then came the line. The one that echoed like a quiet bullet in a silent room. "It's like it was designed not to work without her." They didn't say my name. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. Somewhere around noon, legal slipped in. Not loud. Not obvious. Just a low-voiced visitor with a laptop and a polite smile. She didn't sit. Just pulled aside the CTO, murmured something, then left as quickly as she came. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. They tried again, same number, then a different one. Eventually, a voicemail came through. It was phrased carefully. Not quite apologetic. More like hopeful deniability. "Hi, reaching out regarding some clarification on the initialization logic of the compression core. There's a bit of ambiguity around the latest build structure and system boot sequence. If you'd be willing to offer some informal guidance, it would be greatly appreciated." I listened to it twice. Then deleted it. They wanted me to untangle what they ripped out. And I wasn't feeling charitable. I replied once by email. Short, professional, non-emotional. "Thank you for your message. I am not available for clarification at this time. However, should formal consultation services be required, please direct all inquiries to my LLC, which was established earlier this week. Retainer terms available upon request. Best M." I didn't expect a reply, but I knew they'd read it. Knew legal would forward it. Knew the CTO would hate it. That part brought a quiet smile to my face. They hadn't just fired a staff engineer. They'd fired the heartbeat of their product and assumed it would keep breathing on its own. But hearts don't beat without rhythm. And I was the rhythm. By Friday morning, the Slack leaks were impossible to contain. Someone, probably one of the devs with a conscience and a burner phone, screenshotted the failure logs and dumped them into a side channel called #project_graveyard. It spread like wildfire. Internally at first, then quietly to a few investor whisper groups. The caption under the most shared image? "We've got 12 hours to figure out what she internalized over 8 years. Another showed a whiteboard covered in half-erased formulas and scratched-out system maps, scrawled with a line in red marker. "Where is the init sequence?" The CTO saw it by 9:03 a.m. His first move was rage. Meetings were canceled. Not rescheduled, not postponed. Canceled. Project leads were yanked out of review sessions and shoved into the ops bullpen. A senior engineer, one of the few who still called me the spine of the platform, was publicly chewed out for defeatist energy. People stopped talking in the halls. Not because of respect. Because of fear. By mid-morning, a VP gently suggested postponing the pitch until system stability could be confirmed. She was shut down hard. CTO barked something about sunk cost, reputation, momentum, but the mask was slipping. His tie was crooked. His speech stumbled. And worse, his answers were turning vague. When a junior asked if the core could be hot-swapped for a demo shell, the CTO snapped. "We're not rebuilding the damn product. We're presenting vision." Stay in your lane. Word reached the executive suite by lunchtime. The CEO, who'd been all smiles and champagne forecasts for the past month, now wanted updates hourly. Not status dashboards. Verbal. Real ones. No more polish. Just tell me if it runs. It didn't. At 2:17 p.m., they tried launching the backup image again. The same version that had worked flawlessly 2 weeks ago, the version I'd prepped for the pitch environment. This time it tripped the silent checksum lock. Every compression thread terminated on contact. A dev from infrastructure whispered what everyone else was thinking. She didn't just build it. She trained it. The CTO's reply? Bullshit. Nobody builds black box systems in production. This is sabotage. But even he didn't believe it. By 4 p.m. the board was aware. Not panicking. Yet. But wary. It wasn't just the demo that was at risk. It was the credibility of the entire technical narrative they'd sold to the money people. The compression engine was the crown jewel. The whole $180 million pitch was wrapped in it: performance, efficiency, cost saving. And it wasn't working. A short internal memo circulated. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. Is the IP ours? Has the licensing been verified? Who documented her offboarding? 3 names CC'd. One of them legal. Another, the third, me. At 6:42 p.m., I received another voicemail. Not from legal this time. From someone higher. It simply said, "We'd appreciate a conversation. Please call back before midnight." I didn't. Not yet. Let the clock keep ticking. Let them sweat. They'd spent years overlooking the difference between owning a system and understanding one. 12 hours left. And not one person in that building could explain how the damn thing breathed. The pitch was supposed to happen at 10 a.m. sharp on Saturday. They delayed it to 11:30 under the excuse that a few key investors were still en route. Everyone knew that was code for nothing works and were stalling for a miracle. But miracles require faith. And the CTO had burned through all of his. He stood stiff at the end of the long glass conference table, arms folded like a scarecrow, trying to act like this was all under control. The board was half assembled, the demo rig was powered but inert, and the UI team had resorted to running mockups on a loop, praying no one noticed it was all smoke. The compression engine, the crown jewel, the one they bragged would revolutionize every client's data flow, was silent. CEO entered just after 11. No entourage. No small talk. Just a face like someone who'd been up all night watching a house slowly flood. He walked right past the CTO. Didn't even look at him. Leaned over to the VP of Ops and said flatly, "Get me her number." There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough for the CTO's jaw to twitch. "That's unnecessary," he blurted, too loud. "We don't need her. We're 90% there. I've got a patch coming online within the hour." The CEO turned slowly. "Then why are we running GIFs of an engine that can't boot?" The CTO opened his mouth. Closed it. Legal, seated quietly in the corner with a folder that hadn't been touched all morning. Flipped through a few pages, frowning. "Do we have her IP release on file?" she asked the room, not looking at anyone in particular. Silence. Then more rustling. She checked again. Highlighted something. Stopped flipping. Did? She looked up, now pale. Did anyone sign her IP release form before she was terminated? You could feel the oxygen leave the room. The CTO looked suddenly very small in his $1,200 blazer. "What are you talking about? She worked for us. Everything she did." "No," Legal said, voice clipped. "She had elevated contractor status through her own dev account. She authored the core engine in isolated architecture, outside of version repos. It was never migrated. Never centralized. I'm looking at her file right now, there's no release." "So what does that mean?" the CFO asked, voice tight. Legal removed her glasses. "It means the company never owned the compression engine. We had an internal use license. And when she left, the license expired." The CTO's voice broke for the first time. "Oh God." Somewhere down the hall, a printer started beeping. Out of paper. No one moved. Zio sat down in the nearest chair, massaged his temples, and then said, not loudly, not even angrily, "Call her." This time there was no resistance. They didn't need my forgiveness. They didn't even need my help. They needed a key I never gave them. Because you don't hand over a house to people who think they built it just because they bought the land underneath. And now the whole structure was theirs in name only, hollow, dark, and locked from the inside. The call came at 11:57 a.m. Not from legal. Not from ops. From the CEO himself. No assistant. No calendar invite. Just my phone lighting up with a number I hadn't seen in 4 years and a silence on the other end that lingered just a little too long before he spoke. "Mara," he said, voice strained but not cracked. "Thank you for picking up." "I didn't," I said flatly. "I let it ring. Twice. That hung there heavy." Then he let out a low sigh. Not performative. Not for show. Just a man realizing his entire pitch was circling the drain. And the only person who could throw the rope was the one they'd kicked off the boat. "We need to talk about the compression engine," he said. "You mean the one your CTO claimed was outdated?" I let that sit a beat. "What's wrong?" "Can't get the antique to boot." He didn't bite. "Smart. Desperate but smart. We've reviewed your contract. We understand you never transferred IP ownership. That was our mistake. I'll take full accountability." "Mistake?" I said. "No, see, a mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. What you did was calculated. You fired the architect and assumed the blueprints would magically finish the cathedral." Another pause. A longer one this time. "We're asking if you'll consider consulting. On your terms." Now he was speaking my language. "I'm not interested in staff re-entry," I said, calm even. "No titles, no team meetings, no Slack channels. If you want access, there are 2 options." I could hear him shift in his chair. The faint creak of leather. The sound of a man bracing for cost. "1, I said. "You wire the retainer today. I'll lease limited operational access to the engine under my LLC. I'll be present only for the live demo. Any questions after that are billed hourly, 10-hour minimums." "And 2?" he asked, already dreading the answer. "Try to rebuild it from scratch," I said. "Fail the pitch. Burn $180 million in soft commitments, and watch your board look for a replacement by Monday." He didn't argue. Not once. That told me everything I needed to know. "I'll have legal draft the vendor agreement," he said quietly. "Make sure they read it this time," I said. Right before we ended the call, he hesitated. "Out of curiosity," he asked, "how did you know they wouldn't be able to replicate it?" I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. I just said, "Because I didn't build it for them. I built it for me. Every trigger, every sequence, every bypass is tuned to me." A final pause. "You told me I was replaceable," I said softly. "Turns out, the engine disagrees." Then I hung up. Not rudely. Not triumphantly. Just decisively. And for the first time in 2 years I felt like the balance had shifted. Not because they apologized. Not because I won. But because they finally saw the cost of pretending I was invisible. Security met me at the front desk, but not to escort me out this time. The woman behind the counter looked nervous, like she expected a scene. I just held up the visitor pass printed with my LLC's name and gave her a polite nod. No badge. No ID photo. Just a white label with black text. External vendor, architect. Capitalized. Impersonal. Perfect. Upstairs, the board had already held their emergency vote. Unanimous approval. They'd formalized a contract in record time. All it took was one catastrophic failure, and the smell of $180 million slipping through their fingers. The vendor agreement was tight. Explicit. I wasn't staff. I wasn't under HR. No chain of command. No meetings I didn't agree to. They didn't even get to dictate my parking spot. The CTO tried to make a show of it. Told the team we were bringing in outside expertise to accelerate reintegration. Spoke like I was some last-minute freelancer flown in to save his mess. I didn't even acknowledge him. Just walked past his chair, opened my laptop, and keyed in the unlock sequence for the compression engine with a precision none of them could fake. It hummed to life on the first attempt. He stared at the screen, mouth twitching like he wanted to ask something. I didn't give him the chance. 15 minutes later, someone from HR appeared behind him and whispered something. He stood, stiff, tried to keep his face composed, walked out without a word. He never came back. A junior engineer, the same one who'd whispered, She was the only one who ever got it to work. The day I was fired caught my eye in the hallway. His voice cracked a little. "You're back." I shook my head. Smiled just enough. "Just here for the lease." He blinked. "Wait, lease?" I turned the corner, speaking over my shoulder. 12 grand an hour. 10-hour minimum. Vendor clause 4.2. You could practically hear the spreadsheet opening in his brain. Later that afternoon, I overheard a director mutter, "She makes in a day what I make in 2 weeks." That's when it started to settle in. I wasn't one of them anymore. I wasn't beneath them either. I was above it, floating somewhere between necessity and contractually protected autonomy. No team meetings. No postmortems. No late night, "Can you jump on a call real quick" pings. Just pure leverage. Clean. Paid. Power. By sunset, the pitch system was humming. The engine was primed. The UI wrapped in a glossy demo layer. Everything ready. I slid my laptop into my bag and left without a word. No one dared stop me. Because now, the only person who could turn the lights on was me. The room was packed wall to wall. Every seat filled. Investors lined up like hawks in tailored suits. iPads glowing, whispers sharp. The CTO's seat sat conspicuously empty. No one mentioned him. No one had to. The CEO opened the meeting with a tight smile, thanked everyone for their patience, and skipped straight to the highlight. "Today, you'll be seeing the first live demonstration of our proprietary compression engine, a system designed to reshape how enterprise platforms handle massive-scale data efficiency." He glanced at me. A subtle nod. I didn't return it. I walked to the terminal, plugged in my drive, keyed the sequence by muscle memory. No script, no guide, and let it run. No intro. No speech. Just execution. The screen shifted. The system hummed. Frame by frame, the live compression test unfolded with zero lag. Terabytes dropped into megabytes. Speed metrics climbed. Red turned green across the board. No errors. No warnings. No anomalies. Just flow. I didn't look back while it ran. I'd done this 100 times in private. The difference now was that a room full of billionaires were watching it do what no one else could make it do: breathe. The final module pinged complete. A quiet chime. Then silence. Until the clapping started. Not polite. Not performative. Actual clapping. Heads nodding. 2 investors looked at each other like they'd just seen a time traveler open a portal. The CEO stood again. "What you've just witnessed," he said, "is the result of years of dedication and innovation. And we're proud to announce a newly formalized vendor partnership, a strategic legacy integration that ensures this architecture remains central to our roadmap." Strategic legacy integration. That's what they were calling it. Fancy words for "she owns it and we pay to borrow it." I packed my drive, stood, and walked toward the exit while they launched into the roadmap presentation. People clapped again. One exec tried to shake my hand. I didn't stop walking. The elevator ride down was silent. Just me and the soft whir of the machinery catching its breath. My phone buzzed once. A new inquiry from a firm on the East Coast. Another project. Another build. Another system waiting to be born. I stepped out into the bright afternoon, the cheers still echoing somewhere behind me. A parade I didn't need to attend. They could keep the celebration. They could toast their rescue and sip champagne over the system they nearly lost. Because I wasn't there to be part of the team anymore. I was the line item. The line that reads, "Lead external architect $12,000 per hour." And as the car pulled away, I said nothing. Because the engine was still running. And in my head, I whispered the truth they finally learned too late. They thought they owned what I built. They forgot I built it not for them but for myself. Now, they rent the future one invoice at a time.